Welcome to episode 4 of the Delancey Throne podcast. This episode I'm talking to video game composer and sound designer Andrew Hulshult. Andrew has created the soundtracks for games such as Dusk, A Medieval and many others. Andrew is a super warm and funny guy, and I hope you find the insights into the game industry and his creative processes as interesting as I did. Enjoy. Okay, Andrew, again, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. How you doing, mate?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm very good. It's a pleasure to talk to you. You been working today, or?
No. I've been sitting in the backyard with contractors, but that's about it. Working on my garage. Fun. I'd much rather be doing audio things, but that's okay.
Yeah, I bet. How was PAX? You just recently come back?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'd never been to Boston. It's like a 3.5-hour flight there. Dave got an Airbnb for all the New Blood guys, so I showed up to that, and then we just kind of went and walked around the city for a little bit, and Dave showed me where some of the hot spots were because he kind of grew up about 2 hours from there, and it's a good time. Got to shake a lot of hands, sign a guitar to give away for free. That was from Schecter. That was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
There was also this there was this guy from London that flies back and forth because he has family there that he rides one of those little carriages around, like the bike with the carriage in the back.
Okay, what, like a rickshaw?
Yeah, kind of. And yeah, right in the middle of it. I don't know if you saw that photo where it's us and the Wrath team from 3D Realms and everything, and 3D Realms and all that good stuff. And I think Kill Pixel, but we all have the Monster Zero Ultra for the meme. Like all of us are drinking it at the same time.
Yeah, I did see
that. Dave grabbed a hold of me and was like, "Hey," he was like, "I need you to go find like 8 or 9 Monster Zero Ultras." I was like, "Well, what are we doing?" You know, and I was like, "Okay, I'll go take an Uber down to the 7-Eleven or something like that." And there's this dude outside. He's like, "Hey, mate." He's like, "You need a ride?" I was like, "Okay, sure." And he had vodka in his back seat. He was like, "You're welcome to some." I was like, "Yeah, sure, don't mind if I do." And like, so we're just riding down the street, and I'm just casually drinking in the back of this thing. Like, are the police gonna pull us over at any given point? Like, isn't this open container? Just thinking. But yeah, I came back out, and he was like, "Jesus Christ!" He's like, "It's so much energy drink." I was like, No, it's for a few people." He's like, "Good." But yeah, that was probably my favorite moment, because we were sitting in the back of that thing, and I just got to see all the cityscapes with no car hood around me. Like, I just got to look around. It was awesome. It was only like maybe mile and a half down to the 7-Eleven, but it was, man, wish I could do that everywhere. That was great.
Yeah, I mean, that's an experience that we don't really...
carried away there.
No, please. I enjoy you getting carried away, so carry on. But going back to your little rickshaw ride, that's kind of an experience that a lot of people don't really get anymore. Not just the rickshaw itself, but I mean, when you're traveling around somewhere, you're always in a car. So you're not getting that full view of everything, are you?
No, not at all. In fact, that was the first time I'd ever taken one. I was like, "This is awesome." So now, like, next time I go downtown, if I'm in like downtown Dallas or something, I'm totally going to look for one. I'm sure there's plenty down there, but I've just never stopped and looked for one. It's always been like, let me open my app and summon a stranger to pick me up. The things my parents told me to never do.
Maybe that's
don't get in cars with strangers.
Maybe that's a new business venture for you. You could start like an Uber rickshaw business.
I'm good, man. Audio is hard enough for games.
Well, I'll steal the idea then. I'll get it started.
Go for it.
So, do you enjoy going to the conventions and events and things like that? Have you got any more lined up, or are you kind of a bit more of an introvert? You'd rather stay inside.
I'm very much an introvert, but kind of the success of Dusk and A Medieval just on the horizon has kind of gotten me out of the house a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I'd much rather prefer to stay at home for most of these and just kind of vicariously live through, I don't know, I guess Dave on some of those aspects, and David, and like Cameron and Scott and all the QA guys that go to those. But like, I don't know, this year, whenever you've got a game that's doing pretty well, you kind of want to go out and meet some of these people, and it's gotten me out of the house. So yeah, I've got a few more planned out. Like E3's on the table for me, but I don't know if I'm going to do it. I might sit that one out, and it's not because E3, who cares now? It's more of I've traveled. I've been on a plane like 4 times in like 3 months, and I think I'm good. Yeah. give me a rest for a minute, because I'm an introvert, and that's a lot for me.
Yeah.
But I will definitely be going over to QuakeCon. Yeah. That'll be a lot of fun. I think that one, and maybe one more after that, if there's another one after it. I'm sure it'll be brought up at some point.
Well, I'm imagining there's going to be a whole lot more events and conventions and things that you're going to be invited to, because talking about the success of Dusk, I think there's a big renaissance of old school first-person shooters kind of emerging at the moment, and it seems to me that you're kind of at the forefront of it, at least musically. You're up there. You're at the front, right? In that respect, you're synonymous with first-person shooters, really. Are there any other genres you'd like to explore, you think, as a musician and composer outside of that, or are you kind of happy?
Yeah, no, I totally do. I love first-person shooters. I'd still like to do a couple. Well, not a couple. Like if I can do it till I'm 50, why not? But like, I'd still like to do some AAA first-person shooters, because I've done a bunch for the indie scene, and I think all of them have been announced now. But I'd really like to get something that's polished and a little bit more story-driven, with maybe some. Not cutscenes, but scripted events, like the stuff that you would see like in Wolfenstein, where you're taken out of control for a little bit, but not too much, because moments like that, I can transition into something else. It's hard to explain. If you have, let's say that you're going through a level, shooting a bunch of baddies, right, and there's a moment where you pick up an item or something like that, and you come to a realization that, this is what I need for this. And, there's that small moment where you pick it up, you look at it, and maybe the character talks to himself for a second. Mm-hmm. It's in those moments where, if the story's changing, I'd like for the music to change. Like, as my career goes on, the more complex I want to start making things. I don't want it to just be Rise of the Triad. Here's your soundtrack. It's great. You love it, but that's all you get. I'd really like for it to breathe and pulsate. So yeah, I do want to do some more shooters, but another couple genres I really want to look at is like maybe some high fantasy stuff, some sci-fi horror games in general. I'm totally all about. I'd love to venture into that, but anything that takes me out of my element a little bit, I'm all for, as long as it's not overly how do I put this? Overly happy. That's not my style. Like, playing in major keys isn't really my style. I like to sit in minors and kind of go in some weird directions. I can't really even explain it to you. Just, I know when it's right. But yeah, like, of course, one of my other favorite games is Skyrim. I'd love for something like that to come around. That's, it's a new venture into it, or a Fallout, or I'm trying to think of a good not Penumbra. What's the other game by Frictional? Amnesia. A game like Amnesia, where you have full control almost all the time, and you're pretty much putting the horror inside your own head. That kind of stuff fascinates me, because all it is just scripted patrolling, but you're about to shit your pants. Oh, I can curse on this, can I?
Yeah, no, please go for it.
Okay. You're gonna fucking shit your pants, because, you don't know if something's around the corner. That stuff really fascinates me, because I see those designers as, they're basically musicians, but they were just handed code instead of, an instrument, which the code is their instrument, and they're trying to tell you a story with that kind of stuff and get feelings out of you, and they want to see your reaction, which is exactly what a musician wants to do. So I branched off a little too far there. I'm very well aware.
No, please do.
But yes, yeah, I do want to move on to different things and different instruments as well. Like guitar is great. I love doing it. I'm glad people really enjoy it. My solo work that I'll probably start on later on this year will definitely be in the vein of that because that's what I'm most comfortable with. But as time goes on, I really want to start getting weird, and I think a really good place that shines is a medieval, because we're just about done with that, and the soundtrack's been done for a few months. But man, that was a real eye-opening experience for me, where I was when I finished up the soundtrack for that game. It was one of those moments where you're like, "Whoa! I did not know I could do that," and I'd really like to do it over and over and over again. And I'm absolutely gonna try and stay with Leon and Simon because those guys are great.
Yeah,
to answer your question, yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I want to branch out.
I actually wanted to talk about your work on Medieval because the soundtrack for Medieval is very different to kind of 95% of the work, at least that I've heard of yours. It's a lot more kind of, I don't know, ambient synth driven, I suppose. I haven't picked up on a single guitar in there. I'm not sure if you have got one in there.
Nope. That was kind of the mission plan going into that for me. So I was like, no guitars.
Yeah, I think it works. I love all of your work, but I think for me the Medieval soundtrack is probably my favorite.
Oh, that's awesome! I'm so glad you said that. That makes me feel so much better about it, because I don't hear a ton about it yet, because it's still a game in early access, and while it's done well, it hasn't had the full release where everybody gets their hands on it. That was I don't buy into early access games. Those people, and it's the same people who don't pre-order, which I completely understand.
Mm-hmm.
But once all those people congregate and they grab it, that's when I like to see, what do you think of the music, that kind of stuff, and that's when I'll get that kind of feedback. So it's the tell-all moment is release day.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be very, very positive. Have you got any thoughts on how you're going to be releasing the soundtrack? Are you planning on doing something similar to what you did with Dusk, or? Yeah,
it'll be pretty much 1-in-1. Same way that I did with Dusk. It'll probably go up on same day, if not the day after, onto like Apple Music, iTunes, if anybody still uses that, Spotify, and of course Bandcamp. Like I'm really leaning hard into Bandcamp recently, just because I don't understand why that's not a bigger platform than it is. You can get all the music that you want in whatever file quality that you want. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Like that's super awesome. And that's really consumer friendly. And from a guy who really likes, I'm not going to lie, I've got a bunch of MP3s on my phone, but with the stuff that's really good, like I want, Wave 24-bit or, just FLAC, whatever. Most of the time it's Wave 24-bit, but I like having that option. So if I want to get a film score in that and it's on Bandcamp, fuck yeah, I'm going to buy it from there. I'm going to give them my money because I can get that file source right there and I have access to it at any given time I want.
Yeah, and I think there's a really nice variety on Bandcamp. I think you get a lot more fringe genres and things like that on Bandcamp than you would on Spotify generally.
Yeah, I agree. The further I dive into it, like I totally agree.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I discovered, I'm not sure if you've listened to much of the genre itself, but things like Dungeon Synth.
I have not heard of Dungeon Synth, and it sounds like something that I need to check out.
You need to check Dungeon Synth out.
Yeah, please link that to me after this.
I will, totally. There's some really great musicians, artists in the Dungeon Synth genre, and I will totally link you to some stuff. But yeah, I discovered that via Bandcamp. They do kind of like a Bandcamp weekly, and then they'll release certain articles and things, and they'll discuss various genres. So with regards to that, I'm kind of a big proponent of Bandcamp as well. I love Spotify, and I use Spotify quite a lot, but I think Bandcamp caters more for not just the bigger creators, but also more of the indie creators as well.
Yeah, for sure. This is actually my first full on dive into Bandcamp with the Dusk releases. I was told so many times by so many different composers that are friends of mine they were like, you got to do Bandcamp. You got to do Bandcamp. I'm like, dude, I've never used this, never heard of it. So how is this possibly gonna? And then, turn around and release Dusk. And I'm like, wow, that's where most of my income's coming from. So I guess they had something going on there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's nuts. And not only that, but it allows you to interact, which I haven't done yet. I might plan out some cool stuff with that if I can get if I can figure out what I want to do. There's definitely leftover pieces of music from Dusk that nobody's heard, but I want to see if I can integrate something like that into it. I think that would be nice.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. So with your leftover work from Dusk and various projects, do you have free reign to just upload those or do with those what you wish, or is there kind of...
Yeah, thankfully, just about every agreement I sign, I own all the music. So,
amazing.
Like the digital distribution side, I have digital distribution rights for it. The only thing that is a no-go on that for most contracts, of course, is like you can't sell it to another developer, obviously.
Yeah.
Which that makes perfect sense. Like if there's extras and the developer doesn't want them, of course I'm going to be, the honest dude and go up to him and be like, hey, I'd like to hold on to these and just see if I can create something later on down the line with them. But I mean, I've never done that. It's always been that's always been in the back of my head. Like, hey, if there's anything usable that they don't want, I should probably talk to them and hold on to it. But it's never come to that. And it's always been put your best foot forward, and what goes in, and nothing else comes out. So pretty much everything's utilized almost all the time. The only exception is Dusk, because we had a lull period between early access and episodes 2 and 3, and I got really excited for what the reception was from early access. So I jumped the gun and started creating stuff. But by the time we were about to go into creating, I think it was the 3rd episode, I was noticing that some of these tracks didn't fit the ambience that I wanted or the tone. So I would just kind of push them aside, and I'd go, okay, I'll pull something from that if it feels right. And that's actually, I think, the only time where I've had extras. I don't think I've ever had extras outside of that.
Already.
Yeah.
Well, just going back into a medieval soundtrack, or at least around about that soundtrack. Talking about, it was a lot more sort of synth based. Your work on Brad Rogers was very different than the majority of your other work as well, and that leans very much into the synthwave sort of genre.
Mm-hmm.
I take it that was a bit of a learning process.
Yeah, and I actually pitted myself into that too, like an idiot. They originally wanted that whole game to be like chiptunes.
Okay.
Fred and Chris, both, which when we were all Interceptor Entertainment, they both wanted it to be like a chiptune style soundtrack, and I made a track for him, and it's actually at the end of the OST. It's called Total Conversion. Mm-hmm. That was one of the first ones that I made that I was like, yeah, this will probably work. And it's made off faithful emulations of like old things like the Commodore 64 chips, the audio chips that were in there, whatever the Sega Genesis was using, and whatever SNES was using, like some of the synth wavetable stuff from those. I don't even know if I'm using the right terminology, but it's basically faithful. Yeah. It's basically faithful emulation of those sound chips for the most point. But I just kind of mashed them together and found sounds that I liked and that I thought that people would enjoy and would give them some nostalgia out of it. But after I finished that, I was like, this like, I just thought to myself, this isn't fucking working, man. Like this doesn't feel right, because this game's really polished. This needs something else. So one meeting I just brought to the table, I was like, we should really relook at the soundtrack because I don't feel like this is working. And I didn't have any ideas at the time. I was like, but just, give me a few days. I'll come up with something. Well, Dave and I have been friends for a really long time, since Rise of the Triad. And he was really into synthwave, and he kept posting like all this stuff, like back and forth from like Laserhawk to Carpenter Brute. And the one that made me go, whoa, was Turbo Killer. I was like, oh, this is fucking awesome. It's like, if I can make something like this, or in this style, this would be great. And then I was like, well, you can't do it for every level. And a buddy of mine the next day, after I was like, I can't do this with every level, was like, hey, have you checked out I think it was Comtrues? It's like, no. And he put it on, and like we sat there and we listened to it for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I was like, man, that's like perfect ambient level music. I should totally just dive a little bit more into this. So I took Comtrues and Carpenter Brute and took them to the meeting, and I was like, these two styles of synthwave I think would work really well. Carpenter would be something a little closer to like maybe boss moments, and Comtrues would be a little bit closer to ambient moments, and then we could find some kind of middle ground between the two if we wanted to, for, you know, a little bit more of a enemy centric level. And I said, okay, come back with like a proof of concept. And at that time I was on salary with them, so it was just kind of do whatever you want and bring it to the table. So I did, and everybody liked it, and that was the direction that we went. And it was, man, learning how to mix for that. Like, I was just in a completely different realm. It was, what do I do here? Like, this is what I would have done on a metal track, you know? And this would have worked for strings, but here we are with synths. Okay, well, you figured out the other two. Let's figure out this one. But it worked out pretty well, and I think everything came out okay. Looking back, as any artist would, I look at it and go, Jesus Christ, I could have done this so much better. But I think it came out okay.
Yeah, I think it came out brilliantly. I really do.
No, thank you.
Did that help with the medieval soundtrack then? You already had a bit of experience with a bit more of a synth centric soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
So that sort of brought it over.
Yeah, totally. Like, I think I dropped in directly after Rad Rogers to their project, because Leon and Simon had just recently left the company to venture on and do their own thing, which turned into a medieval. They already had a proof of concept almost ready to go by the time they were about to leave. So they were like, hey, we need music, and we really like all the years working with you. We, you know, is this something that you'd be interested in? You know, here's what we got. And I was, yeah, dude, y'all's level design and your world building is fucking crazy. And it was the foundation of a lot of that. So let's go. And it helps that we all get along and we all have the same dark ass sense of humor. You know, it helps to be able to totally have those people to lean on. But whenever we started, the first thing I gave him, I was like, oh, this is like high fantasy game, but it's like also kind of heretic, hexen vibes, you know, because of the weapons and stuff. So the first thing I gave him, I think, was a little closer to, oh man, I feel like an asshole. The Skyrim soundtrack. What's his name? I was just talking about this the other day.
Yeah, I know him. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, same. He does amazing work. Why can't I think of his name? Hold on, I'm going to look it up right now. Because people, if they don't know who he is, they need to know. Soundtrack composer is Jeremy Soule. That's right.
I knew it was Jeremy, but I had Jeremy Soule in my head. Yeah, okay, that's it.
Yeah, Jeremy Soule is an amazing composer who does not belong on this earth. Like, he just makes crazy stuff that sounds so angelic or, you know, mean, whatever he can get in your head. And that's one of my favorite soundtracks. And so the first thing I did was I started kind of creating stuff that was kind of inspired from his work. I was like, this is so good. I love the Skyrim soundtrack, and most of the Elder Scrolls games have good stuff, but Skyrim in particular really, you know, came out to me.
Yeah.
And I sent it over to him. They're like, you know, we need something with, you know, a little bit more of a beat. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And Leon's really into like old school rock. I was like, no guitars. But like he was totally on board with that. He's like, yeah, no, it needs to be super weird. Like we want something abstract. I was like, okay. And then they said the magic words. They said, just do whatever you feel is right. Nobody's really giving you direction. So have fun. And they said, just, this isn't management talking to you. This isn't a publisher talking to you. This is two guys who are your buddies. Let's just make something cool. And like the first things that came out, they were like, this is awesome. Please keep making more of this. So it helps to be put in an environment where you have free reign. And the second that the gloves are off, you're not afraid to really fail anymore. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they gave me that, they said, just, do whatever you want, whatever you think is right. That's why we're bringing you on. That's special. But yeah, that's kind of the direction that I went with. And it's all categorized by episode and the themes from them and what textures they're using. Level design and texture work, like art for those games. Mm-hmm. It's really big for me. And it totally gives me like the greatest feeling whenever I'm flying through some of those levels, because I'm like, man, these are put together so well and like the texture works so good. That is the biggest inspiration. It's not really a lot of the combat, it's the look. So each time I went through one of those levels, it was, okay, what should this be based around? Okay, what should this be based around? Okay, what should this be based around? And it all just starts with a riff, like a riff on the keyboard, or maybe like some kind of big taiko drum riff, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about the process of how creating a video game soundtrack works. You were saying that you were flying through the levels and things. Are you literally just flying through as in playing it, or do you have access to kind of a free camera mode or something like that, or do they give you art? How do they approach a brief? Do they give you a brief per level, or?
Yeah. They'll give me like a rundown of some of the lore with it, but also they give me back end access. So like the engine side build of the game, I'll fire up Unreal Editor and then go into the level and start it from wherever, and then just kind of fly around just from that. Obviously build lighting first, so you know exactly what it's going to look like. And then just start running around the area, like literally flying, and then give it a go a few times, even though most of it's, by the time I get it, is it's all just concept. The enemy placement is never finalized by the time I'm running through most of this. They're still building on it, but the world building's pretty much done. So I'll give it a go, and I'll give them some feedback maybe on some areas that I'm like, this, I got my ass kicked like 9 or 10 times, that kind of stuff. But the main idea of getting from the beginning to the end is there, and they were amazing about helping me through that and making sure that the right tone is there whenever I'd hand them over to like a track. They wouldn't give me anything and say, this is shit. Whenever I handed it over to them, they say, this is great. Can we add in something like this as well? And I'd take it into advisement and see what comes out of it. But yeah, it all starts with just art for me, and level design is art. So walking through and seeing everything, maybe they've got a huge temple with a bunch of statues. It needs to sound something close to medieval. It's a play on words for the name. But stuff like that. If there's a huge sky that's got like a big aurora going on, it's really pretty and colorful. Maybe I want some kind of angelic choir there. It's just, there's certain things that speak to me more than others. If it's a big battle and there's a bunch of stone around, and let's say that some of it like explodes into a boss, you want like some kind of raging choir, basically telling you suck, fuck off. Which that's actually episode 3. I think that final boss, that was kind of the idea behind that, was there's a choir that's essentially taunting you the entire time in the background. I don't think you can understand what they're saying, and I can't even remember what it is now, but yeah, that was kind of the idea with it. If you go back and play it, it's the huge rock boss that the second that you walk into it, all the stone pillars like fly together, and then they're all in a big tornado while hurling at you while there's a face in the middle of it. And the second I saw that, I was like, that's the most metal thing I've ever seen. That belongs on a 1980s thrash album.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But yeah, it's walking around it, getting into the heads of the level designers and the programmers for it, and figuring out what they wanted, and then digesting that, and then figuring out what I want, and then finding common ground there.
That's really interesting. I had no clue that you had access to back end development. I don't know if that's a common thing.
It's not.
Really.
It definitely isn't. Yeah, like back end development hasn't been given to me on any other project except for a handful of guys that really have worked with them for a long time, which was Dusk. I got handed back end on Dusk. I got handed back end on Bombshell, obviously, because I worked that was a contracting, or that was because I was part of the company. Bombshell, Rad Rogers, Dusk, and a Medieval. Pretty much the only things I've ever had back end on. I don't think I had it on Rise of the Triad. I might have, but I was way too fresh into the industry to even understand how to use Unreal.
Well, I actually think that there's something special behind that, because those 3 soundtracks that you named off are definitely my favorite works of yours. So at least from myself, I think that there's something really working well there. Having access and you being able to kind of sift through the levels and really have a good look, and you can kind of soak in that ambience or atmosphere that you want to portray in your music. I definitely think that something's really working well there. Yeah,
a lot of it has to do more, I think more than anything else, is keeping your artists number one paid. Keeping your artists paid, but also keeping your artists comfortable. Keeping an environment where it's okay if you make some mistakes, no biggie. And I can't say that was, oh, sorry, that's my phone.
Oh, no worries.
I can't say the same for everybody on every project that we've been a part of, because I know there's been artists who've gotten frustrated on certain titles I've worked on, and that's work. It happens. Yeah. But for me, most of the titles that I've worked on, with the exception of just a couple, it was fun. That's all it is. It's a ton of fun, and all you're doing is just creating cool things that you hope that people will enjoy. But for the most part, it's kind of for myself. Like, I'm just kind of getting my own jollies off. Like, oh, what if huge trumpets happened here? Oh, that'd be so badass, And it's dumb too. It's like, just sitting through a level, just kind of, oh man, it would be so cool if there was just a big bass drop here. And it's, who cares? Like, who cares? Because you're picking up a rocket launcher here. I'm like, yeah, but whenever he picks up the rocket launcher, maybe the character notices something, and it's an oh shit moment for the player. They need to have a huge bass drop in their headphones, so they just go, oh fuck, when they pick it up. That kind of stuff. It's stupid. It's dumb, but it works.
I don't think it is stupid. I think it clearly does work. You've obviously had a really good relationship with a lot of the developers that you've worked with, and I was wondering if you've stated that you want to get into some AAA development, AAA games. Is there a part of you that may be a little bit worried that you don't get as much free reign as you kind of do with the indie games to create what you think would really work?
A little bit. Like, I worry about that a little bit, and I was terrified of that going into Quake Champions, but I got shown that if you're working with the right people, it's not an issue. Adam Pyle was the creative director that was overseeing my side of the work on Quake Champions, and I don't think I've ever worked with. Well, okay, he was a super nice guy. I'm not going to say I don't think I've ever worked with somebody that nice, because everybody that I've worked with has been pretty great to me. But man, it was great working with him, because it felt like I was just working with Leon or Simon on a Medieval, or David and Dave on Dusk. It was just, how do we make this cool? That's all that matters. Just make it cool, make it fun. That's all that matters. And it didn't take many takes for Quake. It was pretty straightforward. And it came out awesome, because they, again, they just gave me an environment to succeed. They're like, we hired you for you. We didn't hire you to, reinvent Quake. We hired you because you're kind of entrenched with the community, and number two, we like your work. So, batter up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that has a lot to do with it more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely are a video game fan yourself, aren't you? I know you're really big into video games.
Yeah, I love it. I spend way too much time on them when I'm not working. Right now, I'm messing around in that ray traced Minecraft.
I saw that on your Twitter. Yeah, it looks absolutely fucking insane.
I love it whenever people do like weird tech mods like that. It's great.
Yeah, well, it gives a whole new environment to the game. I think it's amazing.
It's amazing. It's like the same like idea that all those total conversions for Doom did. Like every time something gets a brand new coat of paint, I want to go fire it up again.
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to speak to you about, not necessarily about your the Doom remix. But it seems that initially you gained quite a lot of popularity from your remix and sort of cover work, like IDKF. Is it IDKFA? IDKAF?
Yes, sir.
That's it.
IDKFA.
Yeah. I got it. Yeah. And because of this, like I see online quite a lot of people say to you, "Wow, can you remix this? Can you remix that?" It's all a lot of people asking you to remix different video games and things like that.
Yeah.
Have you ever found it difficult, kind of separating yourself from your remixes and your original work to the audience?
Oh, that's a really good question. I enjoy doing that stuff, but the only time I really enjoy doing it is when I haven't, like in my own head, I haven't heard what I always thought that sounded like come to fruition in modern times. Doom was like that because, man, for years I was like, it would be so cool if somebody just took like the first Doom game and just updated the music for it. That would be great. There's so many people making awesome mods, and I had the leisure and time to kind of build up my chops in between projects, and I was like, why don't I just do a few tracks from this? And it kind of spiraled into that. But yeah, separating that is a difficult thing. Well, not really. It's not a difficult thing. It sucks to get pigeonholed into that sometimes because it's nobody's fault. Like, I don't consider myself like a cover artist or anything, but I also don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I consider myself now more of a just an artist, like a standalone guy. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely people who the one thing that they know me from is IDKFA, and they're like, when's Doom 2 stuff gonna come out? And oh man, you have no idea how much work I have on my plate right now. But yeah, like that's a little frustrating at times. But I always stop and just think, no, like they like your music, man. It's not a big fucking deal. they just haven't checked out anything else because they really like Doom and they like that you're associated with Doom. So just dig it.
Yeah, so it's definitely coming from a position of love, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And like it's I'm totally fine with that. Like the moments when I'm not fine, and when I think any other artist would say the same thing, is whenever people get demanding. When people get demanding, it's like, man, piss off, man. Yeah. Like, I'm not getting paid for this. So like, this is for fun. And like, I'm only going to do projects like that if I think they're fun. Mm-hmm. If I think it's fun to me, that's what I want to do. And that's when it shows through the most. Like if you're just doing something just to do it, it feels stock and sterile at the end of it. But if you're having fun and you like what you're working on, it shows. Which is why, like, nowadays I kind of pick and choose what I want to work on as far as games. Mm-hmm. There's been titles that have approached me that I'm sure they were great, and I can't wait until they release. But it just didn't feel like it was going to be fun for me. I'm sure someone else can find fun in those games, like puzzle games. I'm not huge into puzzle games. This is a great example. I'm not huge into puzzle games, but some people would really like to make some kind of crazy huge soundtrack for that. There's a giant market for it. That if your game has, like, if your puzzle game has amazing music behind it and the puzzle is awesome, people are just going to keep playing it and keep playing it. And that composer is going to get really big off of it. But it's just not my bag of tricks. I'd rather, put a fucking gun in my hand right now. Or a wizard's staff, or a fucking spell tome. I don't care. Just something that I can push someone away with, something like that. That's what I'm in it for at the moment.
Yeah, which I think it would be wrong for you to be in it any other way, for any other reason. I want to talk a little bit about your high fantasy. You want to create a soundtrack for some high fantasy games and things like that. How do you think you would approach that? Because that in itself, like games like a Medieval, totally different in terms of the soundtracks that you've created already and the soundtrack that likely would require. How do you think you would approach it?
I don't think it would be as different as the creative process as that I went through with a Medieval. If it was open world, yeah, of course it would be a little different, but it wouldn't be too much different. You just need you need to make sure, number one, like if the game's pretty, which hopefully it is, it's high fantasy for fuck's sake. You need, like, the first thing that I think I would start off with is like, let's say that we're starting off Skyrim blank. Jeremy Soule didn't compose it, right? We'll just use that as an example. We'll skip through the part with the scripted events when you're coming in, because that is now a meme.
Yeah.
But okay, like, let's say that you're just right in the middle, about to walk into Whiterun, right? You're walking up to it. The music that would be playing there, I think, would still be close to what Jeremy Soule did. A little bit of choir, maybe some harp in there, and maybe some kind of double bass, like stringed bass kind of stuff going on, just to kind of hold the low end, and maybe some violins up near the top. Just kind of make something that's somber, pretty, and still holds the user's attention and also immerses them. You want something that speaks to that audience, but also I want it to speak to me more than anything else. And then, let's say that you're going to cave dwelling. You want something that's real kind of low, rumbly. Maybe every now and then you have a like thing going on with the cellos that maybe has some delay on it, just to make it a little spooky. And maybe you have some bending. There's an instrument where it actually bends certain types of metal that sounds really weird, but if you put it through different types of reverbs, it sounds like something completely different. I'd use something that, sorry, you have no idea what I'm talking about right now.
No, I love it. Please carry on.
Like, just creating, looking at the world and thinking, how can I create this as if there was no ambient noise going on whatsoever? Let's say that those trees don't actually make a sound whenever there's wind passing through them. Let's say that there's no sound going on whenever you're about to walk through a tunnel. How can I create this through music so that whenever that stuff is actually implemented, your music now is pushed a little bit further than it was before, to immersing the player? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's little things in there that add on to the game itself in terms of sound design, that now, because there's sound design into the game, they coincide with each other. It's hard to explain, but yeah, I look at it from kind of both a composition side and a sound design side a little bit.
It would definitely be very interesting to hear your take on something like that, because I think a Medieval is one of the first, at least to my knowledge, soundtracks that you've worked on that doesn't necessarily follow a typical, let's say that with quotations, like beat, like song structure. Things like the tracks in Dusk and with the Doom remix. A lot of it just sounds like a track that you could just put on and listen to from a band. Whereas something like a Medieval, it has a ton more ambience to it, and it really lends itself to exploration and
Yes.
emotional explorations as well.
Yeah,
so it would
that's a big part.
Yeah, it would be very interesting in hearing your take, because so far, I mean, you've done a medieval, but the majority of the soundtracks, like I said, to my knowledge, you've kind of followed that beat. A lot of them are sort of songs that, I mean, I've made a playlist of certain tracks from your Dusk soundtrack, and then other bands and different things like that. I can't remember what the fuck I was saying now.
That's okay. Halfway through an interview, I'm the same way most of the time. I'm like, all right, I just gave this long answer. I'm sure you can rewind if the listener wants to, like just 15 minutes prior. And they're like, this fucker just got completely off topic. I think too fast sometimes when I'm trying to think creatively.
Yeah, well, I'm exactly the same. I think the point that I'm trying to get at is, like your learning curve with the medieval and Rad Rogers and things like that, I think it would just be very interesting to hear you break away even further from, again, in quotations, typical song structure, and more into that sort of emotionally adventurous types of soundtracks. I think it would just be very interesting. So it wasn't necessarily a question, but it was definitely a ramble, so I do apologize.
No, I totally agree with you on it. And in fact, I'd really like to venture into that a little bit more. The emotional side of like horror and stuff like that, and the emotional side of like, exploration. I think those two, I think you summed it up pretty well, because those are two things I'd like to venture in a little bit more. Number one, because I want to, but number two, also, I don't want to get pigeonholed as the guitar guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think
I'd like to be able to do all three,
Well, I think you're showing that you're breaking away and doing different things, like, again, a medieval. I think you are showing that you definitely have a huge variety in the tones that you can create. So when that does come out of early access proper, I think there's going to be a big, because it's not just yet out of early access, is it?
No, it's really close. Yeah. I'll tell you that. Okay. I can't give you anything right now. I wish I could. But it's real close. It's within jogging distance.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
When that's out, I think, similar to the Dusk soundtrack, I think it's going to blow up, and I think then people are going to start seeing those extra avenues that you can create, and then hopefully you can maybe get some work in some high fantasy and horror.
The Elder Scrolls 6.
Mate, my fingers are absolutely crossed.
From a medieval to the Elder Scrolls 6.
That's the dream.
Yeah. No, I'd much rather Jeremy Soule work on that. I want to listen to his stuff.
What about a collab? Would you have a collab with a different artist or composer?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm sure that's going to be on the table for me at some point. Mm-hmm. There'll be definitely a studio that maybe hires me that has somebody on board already. I've actually got something that might happen within the next couple weeks, but it's nothing I can talk about.
Of course.
Yeah.
How would a collab work, really? Would it be kind of you working on a certain level, another person working on a different level? Would it be kind of working on the same tracks?
I highly doubt it would be working on the same tracks unless we were in the same room, which is highly unlikely just at the moment. But I would think that one person takes, this from this track or this level, the other, or one person takes like the action, one person takes the ambient, and then maybe we flip a coin for whatever's in between. Like if there's certain scripted events or a cutscene, something like that. Because most of the time, these guys, like the composers that are in studio, they really want to handle the entire thing themselves, and I totally understand that with them. I'm kind of the same way. When I work on a game, I want to own it. Like I want to own the entire thing. I want to start this and finish it. So I think that a lot of cases, where was I going with this? I think a lot of cases, like a collaboration can feel a little intimidating at first, but if you're working with the right guy and you guys get along, I don't think it would be much of a problem. I've worked with people in the past on like commercial grade stuff. It's never been anything with games yet, I don't think, unless you count like the Dan Bull stuff that I did for Bombshell. But I mean that was for YouTube. That wasn't for like a level or anything.
Yeah. You ever get writer's block?
Yes. A lot. But most of the time that's cured by stepping away from everything for, I don't know, a few days or a week and then coming back to it. Most of the time, though, if the project's cool enough, that's rare. But it does happen, and it'll happen at really inopportune times when you've got something halfway done and you just have no idea where to go with it from there. And I've just found that the best thing is to just walk away and don't even play it like any of the mixes that you have in the car. Don't play any of the mixes that you have on your stereo, anything like that. Don't even play the level. Just come back to it in a few days whenever it's out of your head, because the second that it's out of your head and you're not thinking about it anymore is whenever the ideas will show back up once you show them to your own brain again soon. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's weird, but that's how it works. At least for the last 2 games, that's how it's worked for me.
Have you ever had a time with a particular project that you've just been completely lost at a certain point?
Yes. I mean, Rad Rogers, what I talked about earlier was kind of that, but also, oh man, Bombshell got to be like that about halfway through, but I think it was like that on a lot of aspects for like the programmers and the level designers. We started kind of going, oh, we bite off more than we could chew on a lot of aspects, but I think that all came together. That came together okay at the end. Mm-hmm. The game could have been a little more tightly wrapped, and I think even 3DR would say the same thing these days. Mm-hmm. But for what it was, and for the amount of people that were working on it, which wasn't a lot, that game looks amazing. I will say that. And that's an Unreal Engine 3. And it's kind of nuts going back to it. And it's like, this looks like AAA quality stuff. Yeah. And it was just like, it was mainly like 11 dudes working on that.
What's your sort of advice for when you reach that time where you think, okay, I think this is ready now to be released into the world or to the people that you're presenting your music to? Do you have an issue at all with kind of listening to the tracks back over and over again and just really trying to pinpoint that accuracy? Or can you just go, okay, I think that's it, I need to leave it now, otherwise I'll just go crazy over it?
Most of the time when it's done, it's done. I won't sit there and like agonize over it or anything, because business is business and you have to push forward. You can't just sit around on something. These guys have a product to push out, and you have artwork that goes with it that they need to push out alongside it for promo purposes and for financial reasons. But the way that I know whenever something's done is if I can listen back to it, and this is going to sound real bad. It's going to sound pretentious as fuck. But like if I listen back to it, and it hasn't been until recently where I kind of get like a little emotional whenever I'm listening back to it. Like Dusk did that to me really hard, where I couldn't listen to it for a few weeks because I was like, man, there were so many struggles during this development cycle, just personally for me. And I can just hear it. I can hear it all in the music. And if I can get that out of it, and if I can play the game and still get that too during like events when that should happen, ship it, man. Let's pack it up and go. If I don't get that, I will go back and I'll see if I can make that happen. But I'll pinpoint which tracks aren't doing that for me. And I won't half-ass the stuff. I'll sit there, and if I can't think of anything correctly, I'll raise my hand and be like, hey, what do you guys think of this? And I'll get a third-party view on it. And if they're like, this is fine, man, we don't understand what your issue is, most of the time I'll take my hands off, because the way that we used to do it in writing songs, like when I was in a band, was one guy comes to the table with a riff, drummer shows up, puts a beat down. Maybe you don't always like that beat, but that guy does. And if that guy does, and you trust his motives behind writing for music, then there's probably a million people who do like that as well, even though you don't. And so you're catering to a completely different audience. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, are you okay with maybe you don't totally enjoy this? Or do you want to go back and try and do something yourself? And most of the time, I'll take their word for it, because they're all real big music enthusiasts themselves, so they know what they're listening for. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like it's shit or get off the pot at the end. Like you either got something that you like or you got something that you hate. And so far, thank God, I've had something that I've loved every time I've shipped.
Well, I've got to say thank you very much for giving me that new phrase as well. Shit or get off the pot. I've never heard that before, and I will use that.
Never heard that?
No.
That's totally an American thing.
So it sounds like you put a lot of emotion into your work. I know we've talked about that sort of emotional exploration and things, but it sounds like you put quite a lot of personal emotions into producing your work. Then,
yeah, there's a lot of that, and part of me wonders if I could ever thrive in a studio environment, like on site, because I have to get into my own head a lot. Mm-hmm. And that requires just sitting around for a long time and just getting ideas, whether it be from film, whether it be from music, whether it be from the art of the game, or maybe from another game, just until something hits me. And then I go, there it is. And, your own personal struggles day to day definitely feed into that as well. Mm-hmm. So what I found, and it's terrible, is it's terrible, but it's true. The more fucked off things are going on in your life, the better the output for the music, because you're really struggling. Mm-hmm. And things are really just not going your way. But your music can go your way. So you do everything you can to make it go that way. So it's a really weird curse that I know I'm not the only one that deals with. Yeah. You can see it many times before with great rock and roll bands and great, just great artists in general, where they struggle. And I didn't know that this was a thing until, close to the end of development with Dusk, where I was like, oh my gosh, like I was drinking my ass off towards the end of that development cycle. And you can hear some of that show up in those ambience, just sorrow and like just dark places. And, they're meant to be scary because it's kind of a horror game a little bit. Like some people dub that Dusk into that. I don't get it. I've never understood that. Like, how is this a horror game? Look at this guy's like 9 polygons, but like if that's what it is to them, that's what it is to them. That's really cool. I'm glad. But yeah, like a lot of that outside influences feed into that. And I'd love to be able to do this at a AAA studio, or at least from my house for a AAA studio again. Id was good enough to lend me that, and I definitely wore my heart on my sleeve for Quake as well. Yeah. And I think it shows with that too. Quake was a lot more raw power though. Like I was pumped to work on that game. And those action tracks I'm still super proud of those. They're great.
I mean, going back
sorry. Yeah.
No, carry on.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
I was just going to say, there's a very fine line, I think, isn't there, with a lot of artists are creating because they're struggling emotionally in their lives, and their output is they'll create probably the greatest pieces that they might ever create. And one of the reasons why they create is to get into a position in life where they can be a little bit more comfortable. But,
where they have more control.
Yeah. But then there can be a negative to that, because when you do get more comfortable, you might not be experiencing these negative emotions as much, and then maybe your output might not be as effective as it once was.
Exactly. It's a weird cycle that you have to manage yourself on an emotional level and on a kind of a spiritual level. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. To me, this sounds pretentious as fuck. Like just saying it. But like I feel like I want to say it because it's true. Like if you sit there and correct, if you're in a really good spirits, yeah, you can write great music, no problem. Like I've done it plenty of times. But when the chips are down and things aren't going your way, and if that's an environment where you start getting competitive in most aspects, real shit starts to show up. Especially if you're grinding on the axe for hey, maybe I want to be one of those composer guys. Maybe I want to be something bigger one day. That kind of stuff. That'll gnaw to you on the bone. And that's kind of where I was at with Dusk. I was like, I'm going to create something that I really want people to just go, holy fucking shit. So chips were kind of down for me because Interceptor just closed its doors. I had just finished, or I had just started on a medieval, but nobody had really seen anything. So everything was kind of on the downhill. And I was like, I gotta get hold of a project, and I gotta do something where I can just knock it out of the park. And Dusk seemed totally right, just right alongside a medieval. I was like, cool, two completely different genres where I can do this. And so a lot of frustrations that I had over the last few years, I kind of took out on those projects. I beat the shit out of them. Musically, of course.
That's something I wanted to ask you as well. Do you find it difficult to work on a multitude of different styles with different games concurrently?
Yes and no. With Dusk and a medieval, they're really starkly different, right?
Yeah.
Those are super easy to work on left and right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the second that you finally, get into the water and take a swim on whatever project it is and you're comfortable, you're good to go. The thing that you got to worry about is if two projects are somewhat similar and if there's overlap anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like any artist. I created this grunt character for, XYZ project, where I also created a grunt character for ABC project that I'm on. They look really similar. You never want somebody saying that.
Yeah.
So it's projects that are close to the same vein where I have to tread carefully. Like those projects that want guitars, I have to tread pretty carefully just to make sure that that I'm not basically not. I don't want to say copying, but I'm not taking the same inspirations and working them over to another project as well. I have to disconnect for a few days and then go to another project, then disconnect, then go back to the other developer, then disconnect. And it's all one big process. And that gets compounded if you have 3 or 4 projects going on, which is what I got going on right now.
Right. Okay. I was going to ask how many projects you actually had on currently.
Let's see. Proteus, Nightmare Reaper, a medieval's pretty much done, but we'll count it because I'm still pumping out a couple things. And Wrath. Okay, 5. Because I got one more that's unannounced, but it's way off.
So one of the keys to stopping the bleeding of styles into one another, then I suppose, is some space. Is that kind of what you're saying? You kind of take a bit of space in between.
Yeah, as long as the creative people aren't, super pressed for work, which I don't jump on those projects anyways. If they're like, we need it and we need it in a week, I'm like, no.
Wow. So have you ever been sorry to cut in, but have you ever been approached with someone that says, okay, we need something done in 7 days?
Yeah. There was a developer that approached me with a game that they had pretty close to finish. I won't name the title. It's not like a AAA game or anything, but it did okay for itself. That approached me for some music, and they were like, well, okay, we need this, and we need it, and we need this many tracks in 2 months. And I was just no. they were like, why? They had everything was right. They were putting up money signs that looked pretty nice, but I wasn't interested just because I don't have enough time to get my experience what y'all are building. Mm-hmm. That's why I like to be there from the beginning of development cycles so that I can sit there alongside the art guys and alongside the the programmers and alongside the animators, and we can all experience this together. Even if I'm a contractor, I don't care. Like, I'll go sit in your meetings when I can, no problem. You don't worry about it. I just want to be there so that I can soak this in with everybody else, get the same ideas, so that we're all working towards one big goal. And if you're just hiring me at the very ass end of your project to throw on some music, if it's not an IP that I'm absolutely in love with, that I know I could just be good to go in, then I'm probably not going to be super interested. I'm more interested in getting in the heads of all of your creative people just as much as your consumers.
Interesting.
Yep.
You spoke about film soundtracks. Have you ever considered, or would you like to explore that a little bit with your own work?
I've gotten tapped on the shoulder a couple times recently for that, but nothing solid. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Or at least nothing solid yet. But yeah, I'd love to do that. I think that would be a lot of fun. Narrative story structure with movies and having free reign on what to do with music. Yes, let's go. As long as I like the story, it's, and as long as the film I think is pretty cool, yeah, let's have some fun.
So are you a lover
and plus
of film?
that's yeah, I don't watch movies nearly as much as I used to, but whenever somebody is like, you gotta watch this, I'll totally go watch those. Like the Dark Knight movies. Recently I've finally caught up on all the John Wick, or the 2 John Wick movies. Blade Runner was a huge one for me. In fact, a lot of influence on Blade Runner bled over on a Medieval as far as synths go. It's like, oh, these are so good. We need some of this. Yeah, I like most of the classics. They're classic for a reason. And most of the time, the soundtracks that went with them are pretty great too.
Yeah. What kind of genres would you like to explore with film?
Up for anything, as long as it's not a, fucking happy-go-lucky Disney movie. Like, give me some, like, yeah, exactly. Give me, give me some drama and give me some tension, and we're good. Yeah.
To get into some technicalities, what door do you use?
What? Oh, I thought you said door for a second. I was like, it's like, well, I use the front door for my house.
That's my fucking English accent, isn't it? What
it's
door
all
do
good.
you use, Andrew?
I'm actually I'm a PreSonus artist. Like I'm actually I got a deal worked out with them right after Rise of the Triad, or right in between Rise of the Triad. So I've used Studio One since version 1, and it's been since 2010, because I originally bought the DAW like almost right whenever it came out, and I've got to see it grow up. But yeah, PreSonus Studio One. I'm on version 3 right now, but I need to update to version 4 after I'm done with these games. But yeah, I love it. It's totally built for. It sounds so shill, but it's not. I promise. It's totally built for musicians who just want to grab and go. Like I want to get an idea down, and I'll mix it later. So it's built for speed more than anything else, I think.
And what instruments do you actually play? You do play guitar.
Yeah. Play guitar, play bass. I was a singer by trade, mostly a metal singer, not an opera singer.
Yeah.
I can slightly play drums, not very well. Believe it or not, I can't play keyboard very well, but like everything that you hear that's synth wise, I play it out, and then I'll program everything that's going on. Oh, yeah. So like getting under the hood and automating under everything and kind of programming what the synth should do and what I want it to do is more or less what you always hear on that.
What kind of vocals were you doing? So I know you said metal, but are we talking kind of death metal, necrophagia style, or?
No, it's like closer to it's closer to like the late Pantera-esque kind of vocals, where it's just it sounds just right in your face, kind of punk rock or punk thrash meets heavy metal kind of stuff, barking into a mic, but also being able to carry a tone at those like extreme ranges, that kind of stuff.
Are you still in a band now?
No. Not at the moment. I mean, I might do a project later on, but really I want to finish up a handful of these games and do like just my own kind of album. I've wanted to do an album where I just, there's no publisher involved. There's nobody involved except for myself, and I can just kind of get some shit off my chest.
And would that be all original?
Yep.
Okay, that's something to look forward to. Because I'm a huge fan of your original works. I think I love your remixes and things, but I think your original work really surpasses all of it. So
Thank you.
I'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Getting technical, if I can, how do you get that incredibly punchy Meshuggah gent style guitar tone?
Actually, the plugin I've been using most recently that's real good for that is I never thought I would put this company up for it, but the Line 6 Helix stuff is amazing for that. I had borrowed a friend's Axe effects, and I really liked what I was hearing with Axe effects, but I wanted it in a plugin format so it could be way more flexible. So the second that Helix put out a plugin, I was like, okay, I'll give you a try. I have definitely had your amps in the past, and I was not impressed. But their Helix stuff is great. You can load in your own impulse responses. So if you've got cabinets that you've got impulses of, you can load those up. You can get real crazy with a lot of the effects. You can run the effects in mono, stereo. You can get wacky with it, and it's not super CPU intensive, so you can quad track on it, and it's not going to kill you if you don't have a super high end processor with 32 gigs of RAM on your PC.
Mm-hmm. Going back,
but yeah, that's what I've been using a lot.
Okay, so going back to your music creation process, do you kind of plan things out in the sense that you're like, okay, I know this chord and that goes well with this, and here's a harmony here, or do you really play from more emotion? You just kind of play around and see what kind of sounds cool, like that's good. How do you kind of approach it?
A little from A, a little from B. Most of the time it's start a new session, blank piece of paper, find, in most cases with guitars, I'll just give you an example. Open a session, start a new project, load up the Line 6 plugin or the Native Instruments plugin, whichever one I'm using for guitar at the moment. But I'll just start riffing until I find something that kind of sticks out in my head that that might work for that level, or that might work for that scripted event, and then I'll build off of that. So everything starts with a riff, whether it be 4 bars of keyboards, whether it be 4 bars of drums, whether it be 4 bars of symphony or 4 bars of bass, whatever. But it all just starts right there. It's never, I have this huge idea in my head that's ready to go. It's always start with one simple thing, and then we'll build on top of that as time goes on. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. What are your sort of plans for the rest of the year? Have you got any? Do you have a roadmap? Are you like, right, okay, by the end of the year, this is what I want to have done, or?
Not really. Just kind of going with the flow. A medieval done. I'd like to work on my solo stuff if possible, but you got to go with the flow on where projects are at and how far along everything is, and if it's on schedule. As it is right now, if everything stays on schedule, I should be free around, I don't know, I should have some free time around probably August to start doing that if I want, because I'll only have 1 project, maybe 2, that I'll be working on at the time. But everything's kind of taking its time at the moment right now, so I'm just kind of I'm waiting for those moves to be made and waiting for releases to be done and announcements to be done to see what's going on.
Yeah, maybe I'm being pessimistic, but I highly doubt you're going to get some time to work on your own stuff, because I think companies are going to be coming at you left, right, and center.
I kind of hope you're right, and I kind of hope you're wrong.
It's the balance.
It's like 50-50, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
You're like, I need my garage fixed, but at the same time, I need my head space.
Right, Andrew, thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking to you. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you online?
Most of the time I'm on Twitter these days, just at Andrew Hulshult. That's HULSHULT on Twitter. If you want to check out a couple games that I'm working on right now, obviously a Medieval, you can find that on Steam. That's in early access right now. Also, Nightmare Reaper is another game that's on Steam. You can go check that out and wishlist that. And same with Proteus is on Steam. That's neither one of those are released yet, but they both have an accounts on Steam. If you wishlist them, you'll get notified whenever they go up for sale. And Proteus, well, Proteus's Kickstarter will probably be over by then, but it's on Kickstarter right now. If you want,
I'll pop
if you
it in
want
the
to
link.
bring back that,
I will pop it in the description just in case.
Right on.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.